Welcome everybody to the AVERT International Research Symposium for 2021. My name is Michele Grossman and I'm the convener of the AVERT Research Network, as well as Professor and Research Chair in Diversity and Community Resilience at the Alfred Deakin Institute for Citizenship and Globalisation at Deakin University. Before continuing, I'd like to acknowledge that for those of us in Australia and also in many other parts of the world, we're on the lands of the traditional owners and custodians of this country. In my own case, I'm speaking to you from the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their ancestors and their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to remind us that sovereignty over these lands has never been and never will be ceded. I'm absolutely thrilled to say that we've arrived at last at the start of our first annual International AVERT Symposium. Originally scheduled for 2020, the COVID pandemic, of course, put paid to our plans as we waited to see how last year would unfold. And as we all know, the news was not good. This year, the instability of how Australia and many other countries were faring in relation to the restrictions imposed by the pandemic meant that the decision to hold this year's conference online was really the only safe choice we could make. So, while we regret not being able to see so many of you in person and to enjoy the warmth of face-to-face contact and exchange with colleagues, there is no doubt that moving to an online format has made it possible for us to have a vastly greater number of international presenters and also participants than would have been possible if physical travel had been required. Now, before I say a few words about the fabulous program that we've got coming up over the next few days, I thought I'd briefly introduce AVERT for those who may not be familiar with the network. The AVERT Research Network began in 2018 with a multidisciplinary group of us who are Australian-based research scholars in terrorism studies. Inspired by similar international research networks such as TSAS, START, CREST, CREX, and others, we wanted to harness the national research expertise we have in Australia on terrorism and violent extremism, and to conduct and promote research that can not only provide evidence-based conceptual and empirical advances on key issues in terrorism and violent extremism, but also usefully inform policy and community conversations about the way in which we can tackle these challenges. As an acronym, AVERT stands for Addressing Violent Extremism and Radicalization to Terrorism. And AVERT members do indeed bring their considerable critical expertise to many different dimensions and aspects of terrorism and violent extremism in their work, right across the spectrum of prevention, disruption, diversion, and disengagement, as well as a wide range of theoretical, conceptual, and ideological areas of focus within and across disciplines. We have about 50 research members and a larger number of affiliate members who stay in touch with AVERT events, funding callouts, commentary, publications, and newsletters. And of course, as we've grown, we've been really delighted to add many international colleagues to both our research and affiliate membership lists. While we are Australian-based and of course engage with many of the research and policy priorities that are meaningful in Australian contexts, we are also strongly internationally focused with deep and abiding links to many colleagues, programs, and institutions around the world, as the 10 absolutely cracking webinar recordings that you'll find on our website held over 2020 and 2021 attest. AVERT is committed to outstanding research that serves the public good by advancing knowledge, debate, and evidence on terrorism and violent extremism in transparent and ethical ways. Accordingly, we have strong and again abiding research partnerships and collaborations, not only with government agencies, but also with a wide range of community organizations and partners. And it's this triangulation of academics, communities, and governments that makes AVERT thrive and shapes its outcomes and impacts. As an independent research network with a transparent governance structure that operates without fear or favor in pursuing our research goals and contributions, AVERT is incredibly grateful for the generous financial and in-kind support provided by both Deakin University's Alfred Deakin Institute for Citizenship and Globalisation and the Faculty of Arts and Education, which allows AVERT to not only survive, but thrive and grow. In 2019, AVERT and the Australian Department of Home Affairs entered into a 3-year funding agreement to provide an additional range of research capacity building activities for government, including the production of rapid evidence assessments, research reports, and various research-based colloquia and events. One of the activities supported by this agreement is an annual research symposium that brings together both leading and emerging scholars in terrorism studies to share innovative research and analysis on contemporary issues and challenges in how we understand and address violent extremism and terrorism. We are deeply grateful for the generous support of the Department of Home Affairs, which has made this exciting AVERT symposium possible. Conferences don't happen by magic, nor do they need just funding to get off the ground. They also need labor and love. In that regard, besides the amazing work of Lydia Khalil, our AVERT coordinator, and Ben Freeman, our technical support officer, in getting us to this point, I'd also like to acknowledge the terrific input that we've had from members of the AVERT Conference Organizing Committee, who I'm going to thank in greater detail at the conference close. And for those of you with sharp eyes, yes, we have a new look, feel, and logo for AVERT, which you're getting an advanced glimpse of in our symposium materials. Our new website incorporating these changes will be launched early in 2022, so stay tuned for that. The theme of violent extremism at the crossroads for this year's conference, with its accompanying retrospective look at the last 20 years since 9/11, really chose itself. Over the last 20 years, we've seen violent extremist movements, narratives, and tactics accelerate, emerge, fracture, regroup, diversify, and transform, even as old flashpoints have receded and new ones have appeared on the horizon. We've also seen policy and practice models focused on counterterrorism and countering violent extremism modify and transform, sometimes rapidly, at other times gradually, as they've grappled with a series of challenges in how they are conceptualized and operationalized, both in response to the evolving dynamics of terrorist threats and also the evolving dynamics in particular of community responses to these frameworks. In the current moment, the amplification of hate speech crimes and incidents and the ways in which these are linked either directly or indirectly to violent extremist narratives, ideologies, and action, the rise and impact of conspiracist theories and collectives, the rapidly evolving threat from a diverse range of far-right extremist groups and individuals, the changing age profiles of those drawn into violent extremist networks. And you know, they're getting both younger and older, depending on where you look, and also the resurgence of ideologically framed extremist discourse and violence based on gender means that we need to consider new ways of thinking about what the legitimation of terrorist violence looks like, the environments in which violent extremist ideas, feelings, narratives, and behaviors are playing out, the contexts in which both anticipated and unexpected vulnerabilities and resilience to violent extremism may emerge, and the mechanisms, digital, but by no means only digital, through which terrorist connectivity, amplification, and contestation at multiple levels and scales is achieved, enhanced, and disrupted. The lineup of cutting-edge papers and panels that we'll be engaging with over the next few days promises to stimulate, provoke, illuminate, and enrich us all on these issues and more. These presentations are bookended on days 1 and 2 by keynote addresses from two of the field's most enduring and eminent scholars in terrorism studies, Professor Martha Crenshaw and Professor Maura Conway. Martha Crenshaw's superb intellectual contributions to both shaping and critiquing the ways in which we understand the long arc of terrorism across time, place, concepts, and contexts has influenced generations of scholars who continue to learn from and be inspired by her nuanced scholarship and absolutely eye-watering expertise. Similarly, Maura Conway's stunning research on the way in which the digital era continues to transform our experience and understanding of both the technological and sociocultural affordances from which contemporary terrorism derives so much of its reach, energy, and momentum has influenced legions of researchers, including those of us who struggle to distinguish Twitter from Telegram, to pay serious attention to the importance of understanding new paradigms of communication and connectivity that are reshaping the worlds in which we live and the theaters of possibility for both harm and resistance to harm within them. So we're absolutely thrilled to have both Professor Crenshaw and Professor Conway with us for this symposium, and I know that you'll join me in offering them a very warm welcome. when they appear. Now, I'm just going to pause for a moment because of a slight technical hitch in order to introduce our next speaker, Tim Roy from the Department of Home Affairs. So if you can just bear with me for one moment while I get something else up, I'll be right with you. Okay, it is now my great pleasure to introduce Tim Roy, Assistant Secretary of the CVE branch of Home Affairs. Tim has led the Department of Home Affairs Countering Violent Extremism branch since July this year. He's held a variety of Commonwealth national security and intelligence roles over the last 15 years, including serving as the National Security Advisor to former Federal Attorney General George Brandis. Most recently, he served as Assistant Director General responsible for ministerial, media, and communications at the Australian Signals Directorate. Prior to joining the public service, Tim studied and lectured in theology, and he holds a Bachelor of Theology with honours from Murdoch University in Western Australia. It's a great honour to have Tim with us today, and Tim, over to you.
Thanks very much, Professor Grossman, for that introduction, and good morning, everybody. Can I first pass on the regards of Dr. Richard Johnson, the first Assistant Secretary responsible for the Social Cohesion Division here at Home Affairs. Richard is unwell today, but very much would have wished to provide these opening remarks, and he's asked me to pass his best wishes on to the conference. My name is Tim Roy. I am the Assistant Secretary of Countering Violent Extremism branch at the Department of Home Affairs. I'm very pleased to be making these opening remarks this morning, and I'd like to briefly take the opportunity to speak about Home Affairs' national role in countering violent extremism, and then just make a few brief observations about the conference. The department's purpose is to contribute to the prosperity, security and unity of all Australians. And in relation to our countering violent extremism mission, our goal is to keep our community safe from the harms perpetrated by violent extremists and their ideologies. To achieve this, we work with our Commonwealth partners, with states and territories and community organisations to develop policies and program responses that contribute to Australia's social cohesion and national security. Some of our key programs include the Living Safe Together intervention program, through which the Australian government funds CVE intervention coordinators and capabilities in every state and territory. This program, which has operated since 2015, aims to support individuals that are vulnerable to all forms of violent extremist ideologies. In the online space, we engage with internet providers to remove violent extremist material, and we're actively working with providers and international partners to establish international norms and develop common industry standards to prevent, detect, remove, and deter terrorist and violent extremist content. The department also facilitates online activities to promote social cohesion and celebrate multiculturalism. Our online Wrapped platform aims to increase social cohesion among young Muslims in Australia by encouraging connectedness with community, a positive sense of dual identity and critical thought. Wrapped also aims to reduce the appeal of extremist and hateful propaganda online through the promotion of alternative narratives. Between July and September this year, Wrapped published a total of 70 outputs, including 49 posts across Instagram and Facebook, 12 videos on YouTube and 9 articles on the website. And these outputs achieved a total of over 218,000 engagements and more than 71,000 video views. In September this year, we also launched a second platform called Fearlessly Australian, which encourages resilience in young Australian men in times of uncertainty, change, or adversity. The platform promotes positive expressions of masculinity to young Australian men and aims to reduce the appeal of nationalist and racist ideologies. Australia continues to face an evolving terrorism threat environment. In particular, while religiously motivated violent extremism remains the principal threat, the ideologically motivated violent extremist threat in Australia has grown and may continue to grow. This creates new challenges for social cohesion, for CVE, and for counter-terrorism practitioners. We are witnessing an increase in new forms of extremism and anti-democratic behaviours, with the COVID-19 pandemic being exploited by both religiously motivated and ideologically motivated extremist networks, particularly online. Research and evidence-based insights into these phenomena have never been more important, and I'm pleased to see they form a significant part of the conference program this week. 20 years after the tragic events of 9/11, it's appropriate that this conference challenges us to consider the emergence of countering violent extremism as a distinct field of practice, to survey the violent extremism landscape and to imagine what the future will look like. The breadth of topics that will be presented over the next 3 days will achieve this goal and will provide valuable information and ideas to support the work being done by CVE practitioners, including my team. I hope that these 3 days will be useful to you and will provide an opportunity to develop strong relationships with other practitioners, researchers and policymakers. The conference themes include topics such as narratives and discourse of violent extremism, terrorism, violent extremist recruitment, and assessing youth engagement with violent extremism, and communities and violent extremism prevention. I note the program explores these and other themes across the online and offline spaces, all of which are applicable to our practice in Australia. I'm also pleased that the conference is exploring the role of communities in responding to violent extremism, because violent extremism is not restricted to one community or group of people. And I'm particularly conscious of encouraging effective community partnerships, which are fundamental to delivering tailored intervention programs and supporting individuals who are vulnerable to recruitment to violent extremist ideologies. Violent extremism research is fundamental to effective CVE. We're very pleased to support initiatives such as this conference, particularly where it can deliver actionable research that informs the evidence base about strategies and techniques that will work. The department is delighted to support the AVERT network. This is the second violent extremism conference that Professor Grossman and Lydia Khalil and her team have organised, the first being a highly successful conference last year on violent extremism risk assessment. We congratulate them on the work that they are doing. We look forward to seeing the program this week. The breadth of this conference program speaks to the diversity and strength of our academic CVE practitioners in Australia, and the participation of several postgraduate students also attests to the health of our CVE research community. I'm also very pleased to see a significant international presence at this conference. We're grateful for your expertise and your interest, as well as your willingness to deal with the time difference to be with us today. Of course, this conference is not just for the research community. I note there is a large cohort of CVE practitioners attending. I encourage you all to take the opportunity afforded by this conference to digest the latest research into violent extremism and think about how it can inform your programs and practice. It's a consequence of our present situation that it's not possible to meet face-to-face. We have funded AVERT to build on the outcomes of this conference by hosting several CVE seminars in the coming months, and hopefully at least one of these will be face-to-face should travel restrictions be lifted. There's a huge amount of work that goes into making conferences such as this a reality, and I'd like to thank the AVERT convener Professor Grossman, coordinator Lydia Khalil, and the Research Symposium organising committee members John Chunky, Natalie Davis, David Kerno, Aftab Malik, Natalie Pzora, Deborah Smith, Lee Swaldeck, and Andrew White. And finally, thank you all for attending and for the contribution that you're making to our national security and social cohesion. I hope you have a productive and enjoyable 3 days and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Tim, for your warm and very insightful remarks there. Just before I introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Martha Crenshaw, I'd like to quickly run through some housekeeping rules with everybody to ensure that you have as smooth and enjoyable a conference experience as possible. So everybody should have received a copy and a link of the symposium program with your registration. But if you don't have it to hand, you can also find the program online on the AVERT website, www.avert.net.au, and you'll see a tab for the 2021 symposium on the website in the upper right-hand corner, where of course you can also learn more about AVERT in general at your leisure. When speakers are introduced by the session chair, these are going to be brief introductions just with names and affiliations given, but of course we invite you to browse the biographical notes for each presenter, which appear at the back of the symposium program, to learn more about the truly impressive range of presenters and panelists who are going to be joining us over the next few days. Having run or participated in what seems like a million online conferences since the pandemic began, We understand very keenly the fatigue that can set in over long hours in front of our screens. So you'll notice that in the program, there are both longer and shorter breaks that have been built into the schedule. And we really encourage you to make good use of those breaks to stretch your legs, grab a drink or a snack, say hello to your pets if you have them, or get outside if you can for some fresh air. Q&A for each session will begin when all speakers have finished presenting, and the session chair will moderate your questions. And we encourage you to post your questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screens. These questions can only be seen by the session chair, hosts, and panelists for any given session, and we will do our very best to get as many questions in as we can while remaining within time for each block of the program. I'm sure it doesn't need saying, but just a quick reminder that, of course, while we always welcome robust debate and critical challenges around the issues that we're discussing, please remember in your questions to be respectful of both presenters and other questions or views that may emerge during the discussion section of the program. Please do not post your questions in the chat function because that just makes it harder for the session chair to collate the questions as they come in. However, the chat button can be used to contact the conference organizing team if you have any logistical questions or are experiencing any technical difficulties during the conference. And again, we'll do our very best to assist you. So with that, I'm going to pause for one moment in order to allow the recording to stop and be reset. And as soon as that happens, I will be introducing our next speaker.